September 14th, 1972. 3:17 a.m. Frank Lucas got the call that would cost someone their life. Boss, it's gone. All of it. Frank was in his Tannock mansion, sleeping next to his wife Julie. He sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. What's gone? The money. $2 million. Nate was supposed to make the payment to the ties tonight. He never showed. And now he's gone. Phones disconnected. Apartment's empty. He's in the wind. Frank didn't say anything for 10 seconds. Just held the phone, breathing. Then, in a voice so calm it was terrifying, find him. $2 million. That was the monthly payment to Frank's heroin suppliers in Thailand. The money that kept Blue Magic flowing into New York. The money that kept Frank Lucas at the top of the drug game. And Nate Slick Williams, Frank's most trusted lieutenant, the man who'd been with him since 1968, had stolen it and disappeared. For most people, $2 million vanishing would mean the end. Bankruptcy, ruin, death. But Frank Lucas wasn't most people, and what he did in the next 48 hours would prove why nobody in Harlem, New York, or America should ever cross him. To understand what happened, you need to understand who Nate Williams was. Nate grew up in the Bronx. Smart kid, smooth talker. That's why they called him Slick. He could sell anything to anyone. Had a gift for reading people, knowing what they wanted to hear. In 1968, when Frank was building his Blue Magic operation, he needed distributors, people who could move product through different neighborhoods without drawing attention. Nate was recommended by a mutual friend. Frank met him at a diner on 4th and 5th Street, watched him for 2 hours, tested him with questions, watched how he handled pressure. At the end of the meeting, Frank said, "You work for me now. You move product in the Bronx. You pay me every Friday. You don't skim. You don't steal. You don't use. You do this right, you'll be rich in a year. You do this wrong, you'll be dead in a week." Nate did it right. For 4 years he was perfect. Never late with payments. Never short on cash. Never caused problems. Frank promoted him, made him a lieutenant. Gave him more responsibility, more territory, more money. By 1972, Nate was making $50,000 a month. He had a brownstone in Riverdale, a Mercedes, a mistress in Manhattan. Everything a man could want, but for some men, everything is never enough. The Thai payment was Nate's responsibility. Every month, Frank gave him $2 million in cash. Nate would meet with a courier at JFK Airport, hand over the money. The courier would fly back to Bangkok. The next shipment of heroin would arrive 2 weeks later. It was a system that had worked flawlessly for 3 years. 40 times Nate had made the payment. 40 times everything went smoothly. Then came payment 41. September 13th, 1972. Nate was supposed to meet the Thai courier at 11 p.m. at JFK. The courier waited until 1 a.m. No Nate, no money. The courier called his bosses in Bangkok. The bosses called Frank Lucas. "Where is our payment?" Frank said he'd handle it, hung up, and immediately knew something was wrong. He called Nate's number. Disconnected. Called Nate's girlfriend. She hadn't seen him in 2 days. Called Nate's apartment in Riverdale. No answer. Frank sent Red Top, his enforcer, to check Nate's place. Red Top broke down the door at 2 a.m. The apartment was empty. Not just empty of people, empty of everything. Furniture gone, clothes gone, personal items gone. Nate had cleaned out, planned this, packed up days ago and vanished. With $2 million, most men in Frank's position would panic, would rage, would make mistakes. Frank Lucas did none of those things. He sat in his home office, poured himself a glass of cognac, and started thinking like a chess player. Where would Nate go? How would he move $2 million in cash? What would he do next? Frank knew Nate, had studied him for 4 years, knew his habits, his weaknesses, his dreams. Nate always talked about Brazil, said he wanted to retire there someday, buy a house on the beach, live like a king where nobody knew his name. Brazil. That was the play, but you can't just fly to Brazil with 2 million in cash. Airlines report large currency movements. Customs asks questions. You'd need to move the money in pieces, multiple trips, multiple methods, or you'd need help. At 4 a.m., Frank made his first phone call to a banker in Manhattan. A man Frank had been paying $10,000 a month for 5 years. I need to know if anyone's opened a new account in the last week. Large deposit. I need names. Frank, I can't just, you can, and you will, or I stop paying you. And I start talking to the feds about whose money you've been washing. The banker called back in 20 minutes. There's a new account, opened 6 days ago. Initial deposit of $50,000. Account holder is Maria Santos. Address in Queens. Maria Santos, Nate's mistress, the one Frank's people had been watching for months, the one Nate thought was a secret. Frank smiled. Not a happy smile, a wolf's smile. Second phone call, to a travel agent in Harlem, another person on Frank's payroll. I need to know if anyone named Nate Williams or Maria Santos bought plane tickets in the last week, international flights. Let me check. 10 minutes later, Maria Santos, 2 tickets to Rio de Janeiro via Miami, departing tomorrow, September 15th, at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Nate was leaving tomorrow. That gave Frank 38 hours. Third phone call, to Red Top. I know where he is, and I know when he's running. Get everyone together. We move at noon. At 7 a.m., Frank went to his safe, pulled out $50,000 in cash, drove to Newark Airport, found a pilot he'd used before for private shipments. I need you to file a flight plan to Miami, departing at 4 p.m. today. Miami? Frank, I usually fly. I don't care what you usually do. 4 p.m. be ready. The pilot knew better than to ask questions. You got it. Frank understood something most people don't. When you're hunting someone, you don't chase them. You figure out where they're going and you get there first. Nate was flying out of JFK at 6 p.m. to Miami, then connecting to Rio. But Frank would be in Miami by 5 p.m., waiting. At noon, Frank met with his crew, Red Top, Doc, and 3 other enforcers, all armed, all loyal. Nate stole 2 million, Frank said. He thinks he's flying to Brazil tonight. He's wrong. We're going to meet him in Miami. We're going to get the money back, and we're going to make sure everyone in Harlem knows what happens when you steal from me. You want us to kill him? Red Top asked. Frank thought about it. No, I want him to wish he was dead. At 4 p.m., Frank and his crew boarded the private plane. They landed in Miami at 7:15 p.m., thanks to the time difference. Now Frank had to find Nate before Nate caught his connecting flight to Rio at 10 p.m. But Frank had an advantage. He knew Nate's habits, knew that Nate was flashy, knew that even on the run, Nate couldn't help but act like a big shot. Frank called a contact in Miami, a club owner who owed him a favor. I need you to check the high-end hotels near the airport. Ask if a black couple checked in today. Well-dressed. Big spender. Probably paid cash. The club owner called back in 40 minutes. Fontainebleau Hotel. Checked in under the name Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. Paid for 2 nights in cash. Tipped the bellboy $100. Frank smiled. Even stealing 2 million, Nate couldn't stop being slick. At 8:30 p.m., Frank Lucas and his crew walked into the Fontainebleau Hotel. 5 black men in expensive suits, moving with purpose through the lobby. They took the elevator to the 8th floor, walked down the hallway to room AT-47. Frank knocked 3 times, firm but not aggressive. Room service. He heard movement inside, whispering, then Maria's voice. We didn't order room service. Complimentary champagne, ma'am. From the manager. More whispering. Then footsteps. The door opened a crack. Security chains still attached. Maria's face appeared. She saw Frank. Her eyes went wide. Red Top kicked the door. The security chain snapped. The door flew open. Maria screamed. Nate was on the bed, counting money. Stacks of cash spread across the bedspread. Maybe 500,000 visible. The rest probably in the 3 suitcases on the floor. When Nate saw Frank, all the blood drained from his face. Frank, I can explain. Frank walked into the room slowly. His crew followed. Red Top closed the door behind them. You can explain. Frank's voice was quiet, conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. You stole $2 million. You disappeared in the middle of the night. You were about to fly to Brazil. What exactly are you going to explain, Nate? Nate stood up, hands raised. Frank, listen, I was going to pay you back. I just needed time. I had some debts. Some people were after me. I was going to lay low for a few months. Then you had debts. Frank interrupted. You make $50,000 a month, and you have debts. I got in over my head. Gambling. I owed some people, bad people. Frank laughed. Not a happy laugh. A bitter one. Bad people. Nate, I'm bad people, and you just stole from me to pay other bad people. How does that make sense? Nate had no answer. Frank walked to the bed, looked at the money spread out there, picked up a stack of hundreds, examined it. You know what this money represents, Nate? It's not just cash, it's my relationship with my suppliers. It's their trust in me. When you stole this, you didn't just steal from me. You put my entire operation at risk. He dropped the stack back on the bed. The ties don't care about your gambling debts. They don't care about your excuses. They want their money. And if I don't deliver, they cut me off. And if they cut me off, I lose everything I've built. You understand that? Nate nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I'm sorry, Frank. I'm so sorry. I'll give it all back. Every dollar. Just let me. Frank held up his hand. Count it. All of it. Right now. Red Top and Doc opened the suitcases, started counting. It took 30 minutes. Maria sat in the corner, crying. Nate stood against the wall, shaking. Finally, Red Top looked up. 1,840,000. He spent 160 grand already. Frank turned to Nate. Where's the rest? I had expenses. The apartment cleanup. The plane tickets. The hotel. Some gifts. He trailed off. Gifts. Frank's jaw tightened. You stole $2 million and you bought gifts. He walked over to Nate, stood inches from his face. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me every dollar in this room. Then you're going to tell me where the other 160,000 went. And you're going to get it back. All of it. You have 24 hours. I can't get it back. I spent it. Then you better figure out how to earn it. Sell your car. Sell your jewelry. Sell your furniture. I don't care. But you get me that money. Because if you don't, Frank leaned even closer. The ties will send people to collect. And they won't be as nice as me. Nate was sobbing now. Please, Frank. I made a mistake. I'll make it right. Just give me a chance. Frank stepped back. You had a chance. 4 years of chances. You had everything, and you threw it away for what? A beach house in Brazil. A fantasy. He shook his head. Take the money. He told his crew. All of it. Red Top and Doc loaded the cash into garbage bags they'd brought. $1,840,000. Not enough, but close. Frank turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Nate, you're out. Done. You don't work for me anymore. You don't work in this business anymore. You leave New York. Tonight. Because if I see you in Harlem again, I won't be this merciful. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care. Go to Brazil. Go to California. Go to hell. But you don't come back to New York. Ever. Frank and his crew walked out of the hotel room, left Nate and Maria sitting there with nothing but their tears and their plane tickets to a life that would never happen. Frank flew back to New York that night, made the payment to the Thai courier. The next day, 160,000 short, but with a promise to make up the difference the following month. The Thais weren't happy, but they understood. Frank had been reliable for 3 years. One short payment wouldn't destroy that relationship as long as it didn't happen again. Word of what happened spread through Harlem in 48 hours. Nate "Slick" Williams had tried to steal from Frank Lucas. Frank had tracked him down in less than 2 days, had found him in Miami, had taken everything. The story got exaggerated. Some versions said Frank had Nate beaten, others said Frank had him killed. But the truth was actually more devastating. Frank had let Nate live, but he'd destroyed him, taken his money, taken his reputation, taken his future, and then banished him from the only city where he knew how to survive. That was worse than death. Nate Williams disappeared after Miami. Some say he moved to Atlanta, tried to start over. Others say he ended up in Los Angeles, working construction. Nobody knows for sure, but in 1978, a body was found in a Detroit motel room. Overdose. No ID. The fingerprints matched Nate Williams. He'd spent 6 years running from the mistake he made in September 1972. And in the end, it caught up with him anyway. Red Top, who was with Frank that night in Miami, told this story years later. Frank could have killed Nate. Should have, probably. That's what most people would have done. But Frank was smarter than that. He knew killing Nate would make Nate a victim, a martyr, someone people might feel sorry for. But letting him live, taking everything and sending him away, that made Nate an example, a cautionary tale, and that was worth more than revenge. The message was clear. You can't run from Frank Lucas. You can't hide. You can't outsmart him. He'll find you. He'll take back what's his, and he'll make sure everyone knows what happens when you betray him. That message kept Frank's organization tight for the next 3 years. Nobody stole, nobody skimmed, nobody even thought about it, because they all knew what happened to Slick. Frank Lucas was arrested in 1975. His empire crumbled. He cooperated with authorities and served 7 years. When he got out in 1981, he was asked about Nate Williams. Nate was like a brother to me. Frank said, I gave him everything, and he threw it away for money that wasn't even his. That's the saddest part. He had more than most people dream of having, but it wasn't enough. Do you regret not killing him? Frank thought about it. No, death is easy. Living with what you did, that's hard. I gave Nate the harder punishment. The Fontainebleau hotel room, 84-7, was eventually renovated. The new guests have no idea that in September 1972, a drug kingpin confronted his betrayer there, that a fortune in cash was counted on that bed, that a man's life ended there, even though he walked away breathing. But in Harlem they remember. Old-timers still tell the story about the time Frank Lucas tracked down a thief in 48 hours with just 3 phone calls, about the time loyalty mattered more than money, about the time someone learned that you can't outrun your mistakes. If this story about betrayal, intelligence, and the 48 hours that proved Frank Lucas was unstoppable moved you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you understand that sometimes the worst punishment isn't death. It's having to live with what you did. Comment below, would you have handled it differently? Would you have let Nate live? And turn on notifications, because next week we're revealing how Frank Lucas built his blue magic empire and why it changed drug trafficking forever. Remember, in the drug game, loyalty is currency, and Frank Lucas always collected his debt.